let me see about getting onto my slideshow because I want to
just
share
want to
my.
ask JJ about that because JJ, you've had what some people would consider anomalous phenomena. Other people would call it a higher conscious. Other people call it interdimensional. How do you term the kind of spiritual awakening you had that fits all these categories?
Well, in practical spiritual language, is called the higher Merkaba experience, where you see a vehicle of light, you're surrounded by that light, and you're bilocated or teleportated in a very unique way. In my case, I was gifted with knowledge that I was able to record and share privately with people on very high levels in various governments. Right. Who were interested in the context story that was taking place in the 1970s. I wrote my material down in a book called The Book of Knowledge Keys of Enoch, which is a bestseller upon which our present discussion is going to be based, that highlights 24 areas of the world where there was cultural contact from the cosmic cultures using a proto-communication of higher language symbols as well as resonance acoustics. And Desiree and I have several doctorates, and we've been very privileged to work with some of the top specialists, formerly with NASA and other agencies, who've been looking at the roadmap of what we're facing as a humanity. So our presentation now is going to look at more of the archaeological / anthropological aspects of the true history of the human evolution. Well, specifically in Egypt and Mexico, because of the time element that we have to deal with. But we begin with this fantastic picture of what I call cosmogram, a cosmic picture of how we begin to see the many levels of reality emerge through the consciousness development within ourselves.
Alan?
I was just going to say, Dr. JJ, you were the first, maybe it's not in the slideshow, but see that there were pyramids on Mars, which connects the cosmic civilizations to the ancient past. You want to mention anything about that?
Well, yes, in the Keys
of Enoch, I have actual pictures, the Mariner B frames of pictures taken off the Martian surface in the Elysium Quadrangle in the early 70s. I published this because I had predicted this finding through remote viewing. And when NASA actually confirmed what I saw in the Elysium Quadrangle on the Martian surface, they allowed me permission to take several of the documents and share them with my students, which I put into a book.
And we're talking in the 70s, actually.
I'm talking early 70s. In the 80s, I wrote two books, one called The Sphinx in Marte, the Sphinx on Mars, and The Face on Mars. Not that the face was that important, but it was a reflection of our mental projection to look at the artifacts on the Martian surface, including the pyramidal grid systems that we found we analyzed at a computer symposium. So we're really happy to be part of this great program of teaching to push the envelope backwards and forwards, just to go back to the back door of the Old Testament and the front door of the New Testament to see that we're just beginning to take our baby steps and then quantum leaps into the fuller history of our planetary humanity.
I just want to say one thing, that you are the bridge between ancient civilizations and cosmic civilizations. That's the importance, I feel, of.
Thanks for that, Alan. That's great. Yeah. So let's say a few things that we did this last year, which some of which you were with us. You know, we were invited to Palenque because it was like the 75th, I think it was, anniversary of the man who actually found
the stela,
the special, we'll say, tomb of the inscriptions at Palenque. He went down, he saw this. This is the thing that looks like the cosmic astronaut that people talk about. Yeah, his son, who was 7 years old at the time when he found it, was there as part of the ceremony. So we went.
And the Academy was honored, which is our organization. We are an international NGO, and we're emphasizing really the science and the consciousness aspect of what this means in terms of a series of multidimensional levels of knowledge.
So we were able that you can,
but it's too bad people can't see it better because it actually looks like a Mayan flying a UFO. So he's definitely in a ship flying with. I mean, it's fantastic. Is there a
Yeah, it
better
is.
picture?
And if you look at the lower picture, that's the pyramid it's in. You have to go down quite a ways, and then you find this, and it
We
is.
were honored by INA, which is the most prestigious scientific institute in Mexico. You can see at the upper part of the screen the gathering of members of the Academy for Future Science.
And associates, yeah.
And then at the bottom of the screen, in terms of one of the major temples there in the Palenque area, suggesting, as you just said, really the importance of how this event, this honoring of Palenque, and our research there coincided with the congressional hearings that were taking place in Washington, D.C. that you were attending.
Yeah, actually, you called us while we were there. But let's go on. So this is Palenque, and what people don't realize is there's a river or a canal that runs through it. This is very common in a lot of places. And many of the astroarchaeologists believe that because they're making it like a river of the heavens, so that there's like the Milky Way, and they wanted to direct the river. Sometimes, you think it's natural, but it happens in many places. It also happens in Ethiopia as well, where they also make a river of the heavens. So on one side is the heavens, and the other side is the earth realms, which I think is really interesting. In fact, of course, we were just in Teotihuacan. We're going to show that for a moment, but also that has a canal, a river that also goes through it from the temple of Quetzalcoatl to the sun and moon pyramid.
Which is an astronomy / astrophysics of how we are connected with the family of life in the heavens.
Yeah.
And how the river of life represents really the source that we're connected with on one of the banks of the rivers. The Hopis also have that as their metaphor, that we're going through cosmic changes and that we should be able to navigate if we stay close to the banks of the river.
So you're going to see a little bit more about how the heavens relate to us on Earth. But again, if you even just look at the fact that there is this, the separation between heaven and earth, and the river is that Milky Way that's part of it. This is another picture in Dr. Hurtak's Keys of Enoch book. And it's very interesting because it shows the key structures mostly in the Yucatan, Chichen Itza in the north, going through Tikal, going down to Kamanalhuyu, which is in Guatemala. And at the very center here, we find Palenque. And the other far side is Tres Zapotes, which is a certain mountain area that's also considered sacred. So when Dr. Hurtak did this, most people said, oh, interesting. Yeah, pyramids, triangles, very, very interesting.
But I wanted to emphasize the broken line that runs through Guatemala and Yucatan, because these broken lines represent very elaborate canal systems, now basically under jungle foliage.
Yeah, we're going to show that in a minute, but you see Rio Bec, which is a very major site also being uncovered at this time. But what was interesting is that when this kid from Montreal, his name was William Goddard, started researching the pyramids in the Yucatan, and I don't believe he, at 14 years old, he had the Keys of Enoch, even though we had it in the 70s. He came up with it in this century, if I can say that. He saw that every single pyramid in the Yucatan is part of a greater alignment. Now, he used a little different alignment than what we did. Dr. Hurtak, instead of Chichen Itza, he used Copan. He also used others, but he understood the same structure. And he went to the Canadian Space Agency to actually talk about this and to get their radar sat information. And you can see him talking to them. You can see it's very similar, like La Venta over on one side is very close to where Dr. Hurtak had it, Copan, and then Coba. And he's saying that every single one of these places aligns to a specific star region. So I just have to say it was kind of a young person's confirmation, but he's absolutely right. And he places Orion as a key in the center of this structure.
Yeah. Right. This is very important because in the Keys of Enoch, I was given a mental map, a scenario abstract of a map of the world showing where cosmic cultures interacted with the beginnings of human evolution. And one of the areas was here in the area of Mexico, Guatemala, where there was a major civilization that we would know more about that was in contact with the intelligence from the Pleiades.
So from all the pyramids that you see in the Yucatan, believe me, there's more than 3 or 4. There's many, 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 and there's some that haven't even been uncovered. That's what the Palenque grid said, that a very small portion has actually been uncovered. In fact, the Mexican government is totally happy that they haven't uncovered it because they have to manage it once they're uncovered. But bottom line is every single one of them relates directly to the stars. And there was a goddess actually called Ixcatl, she was the lady cloth weaver, and it was believed in the Mayan culture that every single star was cosmically positioned in its rightful place. It wasn't just happenstance. It wasn't a big bang and chaos. It was very unique. Just to show people the uniqueness, this is actually in the Queen's Pyramid, we'll say, of Palenque. It's called the Red Tomb. And this is in Palenque, which is in Mexico. And we just want to give a comparison, which is what we're going to be doing today. This is one of the red tombs in Khafre's pyramid, which is the middle pyramid. So
when we were there in the 1990s with a film crew, there was actually a bluish entity that appeared momentarily. Unfortunately, that camera was stolen with the film. Yeah. But we were doing musical enhancements with a man by the name of Alan Haworth, who worked with NASA. And we had very sophisticated musical instruments recorded. So let me simply say this for the audience. We were able to work 20 years in the Yucatan, and I'm holding up now the periodical called Archeologia, published by INA, volume 54, where we analyze the musical cues and sound structures of the major pyramidal tombs in Yucatan.
So again, Mexico, Egypt, you can see the similarities that exist there. And this is another aspect. Here's Alan, and hopefully he'll jump on, wave at us or something like that. But there he is. So you have us, Alan, and us in Egypt, and Neil was there too. We were really happy to do that. And you see the 3 pyramids. That this is something that Robert Bovell also picked up on, that they relate to the 3 stars in Orion's belt. And I would argue, and this is Alan and I at the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, and that's the lower red circle on the map. It's very, very similar. You have 2 in alignment, and then the Pyramid of the Moon. And there's, you can see almost like the canal that goes through there. You look to the right of that. And so Quetzalcoatl would have been the heavenly realm. And then when we get down into the earthly realm, what do you have? The Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon.
Well, so some people say that the design was based on the Fibonacci curve. So there's a bigger space and a little space, and there's other pyramids on the Giza Plateau that start to duplicate the phi ratio, which is...
Yeah, and maybe the whole, we'll say Orion's belt maybe is also part of that. I believe that the stars are also part of this larger grid alignment.
This again...
actually, we have, somewhere we have go ahead.
This brings us into a much larger picture of how astrophysics and astronomy played a role in the history of evolution. That these were not just ordinary temples, these were temples of vibration. They were aligned with given star positions, particularly the belt of Orion. We found this also to be true in South Africa. We found it to be true, as we see here in Mexico, Egypt. And so there's a navigational culture, star culture, that made contact, we believe, and left behind enough evidence or made some type of impression so that people would make these huge monuments as an arrangement of the 3 stars in the belt of Orion.
And I just want to say there's probably more than 200 pyramids throughout Egypt. And this is just, this is a data set for how many sacred places there are in the Yucatan. Well, this is actually almost in Oaxaca, in the area of Campeche. These have all been now discovered by LIDAR studies from, as you see in the lower section there. And they place it back as far as 1000 before the time of Christ. And then it seems like about 500 or 600 years after the time of Christ, there was a whole change in the climate, and you lost pretty much a lot of the ancient culture. Of course, they're pointing this to the Olmec culture as well. In fact, they really don't know who built even the Teotihuacans. It's
Right. I
amazing.
just had a question. Do you
Go ahead.
go along with the fact that the word temple for template means reflection of the stars? So people on Earth build a duplicate of the stars for a dimensional doorway, possibly.
Well, I hadn't heard the word temple means that, but
Well,
absolutely.
generally, the word was mirror of the heavens.
A mirror.
Oh, template, temple. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what the 15-year-old kid, actually, I think he started when he was 13, 14, 15-year-old kid, said that every single pyramid in the Yucatan matches a star constellation. But there's so much, and that's what we're trying to show you, that the Yucatan probably had 1 million to 2 million people living there at the time of Christ. It was probably more densely populated than even the Middle East. And these are what they're finding now.
So was there a jungle? Let me just say, was there a jungle there? Was it similar to more agricultural as opposed to jungle, which it is now?
Well,
Definitely. But there was a matrix of canals, as you see in the upper part of the screen.
This is what
I was part of a jet propulsion lab survey that took place, and you can see the jungle part of the lower part of the screen. You can see the exact area, the same area at the upper part. And note the elongated canal systems, which in heavy jungle is almost impossible to think of.
And these are all man-made canals, probably 2,000 years old. So, even what the outside looked like, it doesn't matter, but they were able to do agriculture for 1 million people, if not more. It's amazing what they found. They just found, and I'll go back for just a couple of slides here. Look at, these are all structures. These are primary structures and other structures. And that's over by the Bay of Campeche, Bay of and then also, this is what these places are. You can see pyramids throughout. It's amazing. There's tons and tons and tons, and there was all water. Anyway, let's look a little bit about the heavens. So according to Linda Shelley, the Mayans respected the maize god, which they saw born from the turtle shell. Now, where's the turtle shell? Well, if you look at the picture, this is all, the black and white here is all from archaeological ruins and findings in the Mayan culture. You see the 3 stars of the belt of Orion on the back of the turtle shell. So basically, we are built from Orion. We consider Orion like the vortex point that leads to higher heavens. And when the reality came through into, or at least you should say humanity came through into this reality, we came through the belt of Orion.
So to associate the pyramids, though, with the belt of Orion, you would have to go back at least 12,000 years in terms of the mapping of star position. So this is a much earlier history that's being confirmed by anthropologists from different directions of Mesoamerican research.
Right. And so another, this is all from Linda Shelley. You can see the turtle creation. They respected the Safe, Rigel, and the first Onaltak. They consider that the 3 hearthstones of their sacred fire. And so you can see that this was part, and this is the lower part of Orion for those that aren't familiar with those stars. You'd have Betelgeuse in the north, in the further north, those aren't being shown. So this is what she felt was the essence of the Mayan culture. Now let's look at it in terms of larger Milky Way. And this ties in directly to what Dr. Hurtak also wrote in the Keys of Enoch. On one side, you have Orion, if you look in the lower part of the sphere, and this is just the heavens around us.
The lower right side.
And the upper side, you see Draco and the Ursa Minor, and also ultimately in that area, Ursa Major constellation. We believe this is showing the duality of our system. And we think that this is actually part of, we'll take another quick look at Orion to see the 3 stars of the belt, the pyramid, and what it looks like. But this also ties directly into also the Lakota knowledge. Let's take a look at this. This is so important when we're talking about true history.
Particularly the type of ceremonial arrangement they had. And from a standpoint of anthropology / astrophysics, you have the same alignments. And Desiree, you can lead us as we look at the bottom of the figure, going to the upper right-hand side.
Right. So this is the Lakota star knowledge, and they had the 3 belt stars of Orion. This whole structure is called Tayamni, and it consists in the center, in the lower, between the first 2 arrows, you see the Mintaka, Onalam, and Onaltak. And then you have the next level is the ribs, which consist of the stars Rigel on one side, Betelgeuse on the other. And then the Cyntae is the brightest star in the night sky, Sirius. It's connected with the Canis Major constellation. You're going to see the same cosmology in the Great Pyramid.
So different cultures of the world from different timelines, all pointing to what we will call the stargates. In the ancient language, the prophets, the Sha'ara, the stargates that open, allowing us to entertain really the master plan or the master universe behind the physical universe, connected with the star systems of Orion as the belt of initiation.
Right. And so all right, I'm going to jump. Okay, we're going to come back to showing a little bit more of that. But I just want to say, how did we lose all this information? How did it go away? Well, the Aztecs tell us that there were 5 different sun cycles. And we know, and many people feel that we are in part of one of those right now. So let's take a look at what that is. Well, the first is the Jaguar sun. The second is the wind sun. The third, and I want to emphasize this, was the rain sun. It was assigned to fire. And Tlaloc was the principal god. We saw that name also in Teotihuacan because that was, even though it was considered also Mayan and Aztec together. And that whole cycle was destroyed by a great fiery rain. That could be something like maybe a meteorite that had hit the planet.
Right. So we have then on the 4th, the water sun assigned to the, should we say, the cataclysmic cycles of water. And finally, the earthquake sun, which of course is our turned age, and deals also with the effect of the sun on the Earth's surface mantle, as well as the episodes of what we'll call increasing earthquakes that are taking place in volcanic activity.
So it's interesting that they have, well, pinpointed the last 4, and now maybe really, maybe pointing to the last 5th that's coming up. That's just something to show why that some of these cycles are unknown in the past because they.
Wait, this is happening now, the earthquake sun, or are we moving
That's
out
what
of
they feel we're in right now. Well, not. That's the next stage. The next stage is going to be earthquakes.
Oh,
That's what's going to destroy our planet, according to the ancient Aztec culture.
What should we do about it?
Well, we have to have a better psychology, and we have to be able to be out of cities because places of population concentration will be devastated by the lack of food and water resources if cataclysmic geology is the tune of the day. So
we're not saying it's going to be in the next 2 or 3 years. So we're just saying that this is what.
But I think people need to know what the National Geographic information from Central America has shown us, that huge city-states were destroyed because of planetary change.
Yes, and that's what we're trying to show here, because a lot of the information was lost as to why Orion or why Alpha Draconis or why Sirius were keys. And we're going to get to that, but I first want to say about some of the ancient knowledge.
I mean, first of all, Cynthia was from Harvard University.
Well, okay, we haven't gotten there yet. So we're about to now keep in Mexico for just a little bit longer. And, there's a very big volcano in Mexico, and everyone should know that that's called Popocatépetl. I don't pronounce it perfectly, but basically it's right by one of the largest cities in all of Mexico called Puebla. And there was a basin called Valsequillo, which a mutual friend of ours, Alan, did a great video on to say what had happened there. Well, when this young girl, Cynthia Williams, published her first paper, she was a Harvard archaeologist, and she was back, really, we'll say a long time in the 70s. She did this research. She was actually originally from the area of Colorado, and she kept doing radiocarbon dating of animal remains, which proved to be over 35,000 years ago. And then uranium dating produced ages up to 260,000 years ago in terms of showing that there were burials, that there was humanity. Well, we won't say humanity in the sense we know, but hominids that had existed there in this area 260,000 years ago. And so she basically got kicked out of her job, and she
You
suffered.
see her picture there in the lower right-hand part of the screen. A remarkable woman, scientist, who paid the price of saying what we consider to be ground truth. And
Yes,
our work has been with professional archaeologists, geologists, linguists. Again, I want to emphasize this, that we work on very high levels behind the scenes because the information is quite startling and shocking that we've been compressing history into the last 6,000 to 12,000 years, when we obviously have found evidence now going much earlier, both in Mesoamerica as well as in Egypt.
Right. So she found stone tools. I forgot to mention those, that important fact, going back in the area of Puebla, Mexico, which is a volcano very close to also Mexico City, going back 35,000 years ago, maybe even 260,000 years ago. I have to say, we were just in Mexico with Jaime Maussan, famous ufology researcher, and he has on his big screen a camera that watches this Popo volcano, and there's always UFOs around it, and it's been spewing from time to time, and it does it on a regular basis. We believe that the UFOs are there to protect the civilization, to try to neutralize the magna flow that's underneath this huge volcano, to try to really preserve humanity a little bit longer. So it's very exciting to see the UFOs. You can check it out on many people have talked about it.
I would prefer to use the word paraphysical phenomena, because UFOs tend to look at the old vocabulary of structured technology. I brought with me a picture showing a light that appeared at one of our locations in Mexico when we were doing research, and the light takes on the form of a dove. And we think of what the keys of Enoch speak of, the return of the dove, that higher intelligence will use symbolic forms and manifestations to manifest the importance of key areas where archival information is being found.
So let's go on. And, it's not just in Mexico, because if you live near San Diego, you can go to the museum there and you find that there were mammoth bones placed, they think, by some sort of hominid creation. That could be Neanderthals or anything else that
over 130,000 years ago.
Right. And they actually, because they were laid out in a logical pattern, they've now been moved to the museum in San Diego. We actually went to see it recently. It was very, very interesting to be able to go and see these bones. But just to say that there has been humanity around for a long time. And Alan, you and I have spent time out towards Joshua Tree. And there's also what's considered the Calico early man tools. So these could go back as much as 200,000 years ago, that people actually lived in these areas, had stone tools, and you can see them right here. The normal tradition, it would be 18,000 to 20,000 years ago. The more far out would be 200,000 to 20,000 years ago. And you can see them, they're tools.
We saw that in the Egyptian museum, actually. Mohammed pointed out that there may be cycles of time where there are great civilizations and those civilizations collapse, and then they have to return to stone tools, because sometimes these stone tools are actually early or later than the temples, the great temples that were created before them. So there are cycles of time. And I always think, well, what if they find our civilization 100, 1,000 years later? What will they think of who we were? Maybe they'll be primitives that find us, or maybe they'll be an advanced civilization, or maybe we'll be them. But it's fascinating, the mysteries of the ancient past.
Now, this is our true history. Yeah, and just a few more little points.
Places where we've investigated in South America.
Yeah, and this is from Wikipedia, because actually Wikipedia is pretty conservative, but they actually point out these civilizations going back 11,000, 13,000. And this is the place we've worked, Boqueria, Pedro Ferrada, which really seems to go back as much as 50,000 years ago. We have some pictures of that.
It's like a Stonehenge in Brazil.
And then Monteverdi also maybe going back 33,000 years ago. So, this is where we are at. This is what history is. And again, Wikipedia is very conservative in terms of what it puts out, but it can't ignore the facts any longer. very interesting. This is the Nature magazine in terms of the Pedro Ferrada. They were hearths and they were line drawings. The line drawings, you can go back to 17,000, the hearths to 32,000 years ago. And then they did ABOX, which is acid-base wet oxidation on ash samples that went back 55,000 to 59,000 years ago. So this is just basically what exists around the planet when you talk about true history. We really have civilizations going much further back. Let's go on to some other interesting places in South America.
So are we looking at hominids, or we're looking at variations of human anatomy? Here on the left side of the screen, we see the various face forms, skulls that have been recovered from the Carpathian Mountains of East Europe, and later in Austria, and of course in Peru in particular. And then in the center of the upper and lower pictures on the left, we see a type of triangular face. This was found in the jungles of Venezuela by a colleague of mine. So there have been, in the indigenous traditions, various types of star nations or people have visited. In fact, one of the more local visitors look like what we have pictured on the right-hand side of the screen, a picture drawn by one of my colleagues.
It was also common in Egyptian hieroglyphs and paintings of the tombs, this elongated skull. And I often say, my skull might go back a little bit, and you see that in certain mummy skulls, but you couldn't get my skull to be that high. I don't care how many cloths you wrapped around it. I think they were trying to look like the wise ones.
But this is the contemporary visitor. I showed this picture at the first disclosure conference in Washington, D.C. in 1995, the elongated head. But then look at the details of the dress that was seen on this figure with it looks like monolithic staircases on left and right side. Well, it so happened that we were involved with Dr. Shock in Yonaguni, Japan, doing underwater surveys of alleged ancient societies. And the staircases that we came across look exactly like what we see here on the garments of these stellar visitors.
And you also find it in Bolivia and in the border of Peru, these same staircase.
But let me ask you something. When you wrap the skull like that, it obviously changes the neurology. Does it change thought? Does it change the nature?
But I'm saying these people did not have, they couldn't, they tried to wrap the skull, but that's not who these beings are. That the African cultures and the other cultures later, because they try to mimic what they had seen to be kind of shamanistic, they tried to do that. But there's no way that you can get that much of a skull out of almost any of our heads. So that's
just alien skulls, you're saying.
These are alien skulls. And of course, a lot of have been found now over close to Nazca. And I just want to say we were just with Jaime Maussan again. And you can see this is the Paracas culture. And the stone tools have been dated as far back as 8,000 years. But you find these elongated skulls all over the place. And also here's the mummy from the Nazca mummy. And, a lot of people put this down and say it's fake. But when you really look at the genetic blueprint and you look at the reality of it, there are 3 fingers on the hands. Interesting, the last Steve Mera showed the also the event in Brazil in Varginha. They had 3 fingers as well. So
and I was there in Virginia, as you know, Ellen, with the top experts looking at the physical specimens, of which there were 4 at that time. Upwards of 20 altogether were found and sent to medical labs for an examination. In the essence, we are beginning to realize we're just one of many species, perhaps hundreds of different races in our physical universe.
But I want to just ask you, while we're on the elongated skulls, Akhenaten of Egypt is seen, his statues have very elongated skulls. So he
may have been one of those races that had come down and then began to help us. I mean, this mummy, in terms of the one Jaime has been working with, Maria and Vavida, and then also the little bodies, they are probably not that old, but they could be offspring from those other civilizations. But they do seem to have a higher technology. And
so we're working with paleontologists and cultural anthropologists who say these are real areas of an earlier humanity that was on the planet. Of course, there's the big debate, are they true extraterrestrials or are they simply terrestrials that we have glorified through cultural mythology?
So let's go on. And I just want to, this just came out in Nature, so we had to put it in December 2023, a 27,000-year-old pyramid controversy hits bold claim. And this is a pyramid called Gunung Padang, and it's in the area of Indonesia. And, you know, I mean, they're claiming it's older than Göbekli Tepe, which is, you know, and
the current historic bar.
And Nature magazine is the most sophisticated scientific magazine in English in the entire world. So it's an amazing thing. It says it would be much older than Egyptians' Great Pyramids if it's even human made at all, is what they say. But of course, it's really, they're kind of playing games with it, but it's so old. So not even the pyramids. And of course, what did Muhammad say? How old did he say, Alan, the pyramids were?
Well, you could say they're at least 30,000 years old, but also don't forget Graham Hancock just did a very amazing special on ancient apocalypse. He includes a lot of this work, but he comes to different conclusions than we do. So let's look at the pyramids as they exist around the world. You've been to the Bosnian pyramid. Were you impressed? Did you feel it was the real thing?
Inside, yes.
Yeah, well, actually, you go into the tunnels
Because
nearby.
there was blue lights that appeared when we used mantrams. And again, I wanted to stress what you and Desiree discussed at the beginning. We're not dealing with phenomena, but noumena, mental events that can be recorded. And we've been able to film the lights, the paraphysical sound structures, and also we emphasize in our teaching that unless we activate the right hemisphere of the brain through sound, the intellectual side, the left right, cannot fully understand or comprehend why these temples were also connected with the balance of sound, vibration, and one had to engage in some fashion with the raising of consciousness through sounds in order to understand that we were biotransducers or living vehicles of sound vibration, which is part of the greater interconnection we have, the interlocking keys, as it were, with the cosmic self. So the pyramid represents really the Bible in stone, the archive of information, the chart of different levels of the human evolution, as we see here from different parts of the world.
Yeah, and this is just giving you a chart of the heights of many of them. And of course, the Pyramid of the Sun that you and I were just at is really one of the tallest in the world, although the base figures are sometimes very similar to each other. Let's look at what Dr. Hurtak said, going back to the idea of Osiris, Orion, Sirius, and Alpha Draconis.
The keys of Enoch tell us key 108. During previous geomagnetic cycles, the north star shaft of the Great Pyramid originally pointed towards the circumpolar star of Alpha Draconis, and the south star shaft pointed towards the Taurus Orion constellations, Taurus being, of course, the sacred bull, Orion representing the three stars in the belt of Orion, or the belt of the swordsman who kills the bull, or the sacred symbol of the stars. So we see anthropology on both sides being reflected, one towards Orion, which would be positive synthropy, the electrification of matter, positive energy or discharge connected with the system of Orion. The other negative entropy connected with Alpha Draconis, the dragon-like downward spiral of life. And so we have to choose in this type of symbolic structure. Do we go with the higher or do we go with the lower spiral?
Right. And so where are we in all of this? Well, why is this significant? Well, we're in the Orion arm connected with our Milky Way. If you look at the sun in the center, this is the Orion arm. You can see Orion's belt stars are not that far away. If you look to the left of where it says sun, you get the idea of maybe why they're talking about this, but also the whole dichotomy that we live in, this dualistic system.
And scientists were not aware in the 1970s that we were, I'm thinking it in general, that we were in the arm of Orion. This was pointed out to me by my contact with Enoch, who also said our sun was a variable star, which was also rejected in the 1970s and proven later to be true in the first decade of the 21st century.
And I just want to say, because the Pleiades is also an important star system, and in Dr. Hurtak's Key 407, we have this picture that you have Sirius coming from the Queen star shaft, Orion coming from the King star shaft, and if you draw a line between them, you'll actually end up at the Pleiades. And we do believe the Pleiades is really our source of our Adamic species. We are an Adamic species, and we exist in other parts of the universe. And the structures we make point to our heritage, we'll say our cosmic family.
So again, the use of certain terms like Adamic, meaning Adam and Eve, who were able to talk with the divine mind or higher intelligence,
But
as opposed to
yeah,
the hominid intelligence that was not able to fully navigate through the stars with adequate cosmic language.
But when I say Adamic, I'm speaking male and female as well. So this is what is in the Keys of Enoch, showing that dichotomy with the swordsman of Orion on one side and the Alpha Draconis on the other, as part of the larger body of Nut.
And around the focus of the human initiate, we see vibrations of music connected with the angelic figure at the bottom. And this is the prelude to our finding of the tomb of Osiris, the Lord of or teacher of Egypt, who brings music to the planet. And by using musical cues and ground penetrating radar, we were able to locate the tomb of Osiris in 1997. This is very important because with the finding of the tomb of Osiris, according to Egyptian mythology, the Godhead will return.
So I just want to say the importance of the pyramid before we get to the tomb, that there's an energy structure just by the very fact of the limestone that's there, the quartz that's in the limestone, the other materials there's also that are energizing these structures. And the ITMO University, which is in Moscow, actually took models. They didn't take the pyramid. This is not energy from the pyramid, but they made similar models. And they used electromagnetic waves from the 200 and 600 meter wavelength. And they saw these naturally occurring energies that take place inside the pyramid itself. So amazing. And as you know, there's also the SCAN project going on where muons are being
bombarded.
Well, it's a natural bombardment, but they're using like an X-ray plate to analyze it. And when there's holes and voids in the pyramid and the X-ray plate, they're actually saying that these are structures that are missing. So there could be many more structures.
So the Japanese and the
Great
French
Pyramid.
scientists involved with the SCAN project have been able to find at least 3 other rooms or chambers that are very significant, as you see in the upper right part of the screen. We have had the opportunity to work in the lower part underneath Egypt, where we have found other evidence of a vast labyrinthine tunnel system and other information that we'll be bringing out in our new publications this coming year, dealing with Giza's industrial complex. So there was not only rooms of initiation teaching, but actual areas where gases were made and used for the inner light system that allowed the Egyptians or those that preceded them to connect a whole labyrinthian system with lighting techniques.
Right. And so we're going to see that in a few moments. But just to say that it's more than 3 pyramids, as you were saying earlier, Alan, that there's actually 9 pyramids on the plateau. There's 6
major pyramids.
Yeah, well, there's 3 big ones and 6 little Queen's pyramids. But you can see all the different, we'll say, tombs and areas that are on there in this special graph that was analyzed and done. We've done some of that grafting.
And here we go back to this famous exploration in 1997. I'm there with 2 of my colleagues, and we're using what we call ground penetrating radar that you can see in the foreground on the right by one of the smaller pyramids.
And so here we start going into the tomb of Osiris, which is actually just a little bit further down from this. We're not actually showing the actual tomb location here.
But it's along the avenue. This is very important because this is a reference obliquely in the scriptures of the New Testament.
And this is a rough copy of it. That you go down a little ways, then you go all the way down this huge ladder. Ultimately,
3 different levels that we were able to go and explore because the Nile River was very low at that time, and we were fortunate to be there doing our studies. Now, I had in my cosmic contact with Enoch been shown an underground labyrinthian system, and more specifically, where we would go to find a particular tomb. And so following this, along with the intuitions that we had as a team, we were fortunate enough to go down to the third level where we were able to scrape sand off the upper part of the surface.
Which we'll show you in a minute, but just to say that this is 30 meters or 100 feet when you finally get down to the lower area. There I am. This is what it looks like from the lower part of the ladder. And then also, as Dr. Hurtak's using the same equipment we had used up above, pointing to the tomb. Here we are.
My foot is on the tomb lid itself. The cameras are there. Everything had to be lowered by cables because there was no light. We had to bring in our own light sources. But as you can see here, it didn't take too much to find the lid of the Osiris tomb. Unfortunately, we didn't have permission to excavate. We had permission to film, which we've done, we actual film underground, as well as to explore through remote sensing technology. But the Egyptians then took over our project and made it their project. But we were there to find the lid 2 years before the Fox Television News release special that was made in 1999 with Maury Povich and Dr. Zai Hawass, who claimed that they were there at the first, but they referenced that there was an earlier group there 2 years before, which is our research team, as we see here in the underground passageway.
Right. And so these were pillars. The guy sitting on one of the pillars, there's 4 pillars on each side. And again, you're 100 feet down under the Giza Plateau, right on pretty much underneath the causeway from the middle pyramid to the Sphinx. So
this is highlighted in our book, which we encourage everyone to get.
It's available on Amazon or on our website, keysofenoch.org. So it shows this information, but it also shows what we believe to be the case in Giza, and that is that Giza itself was a way. Now we already know
energy production machine through which hydraulic water pumping systems, as you see here at the bottom of the screen, were used to bring water up, and then through gaseous reactions in the interior, hydrogen was produced.
Right. And you may remember, Alan, as we walked up the Grand Gallery, there's little notches on each side of it, perfectly notched on each side, one across from the other. And if they had put an anode and cathodes in there, they could have produced what we're showing here, gas, and particularly hydrogen gas, to be used in the pyramid itself.
I'm showing the actual drawing that Desiree has made on the screen. If you can look at the upper right side, you'll see how easy it was for the Egyptians to take salt water and fresh water and create hydrogen. Now, there's been several books.
Wait. I'm just curious. What did they do with the hydrogen, though? What was
we're
the
going to look at it. We believe that they were able to do this in several structures. Here's one. It's an ancient writing. We're going to read it, what Herodotus said. This is in Lake Moeris. This is about a couple-hour drive south of Giza, and they said that the pyramids went down into this lake as much as they were above. And you can look at the top. They're almost like lighthouses. What could they do with it? Well, we use hydrogen for agriculture. We use hydrogen for energy technology, and people are, like you, Alan, drinking hydrogen water. You want to just say about that in 1 second about hydrogen water?
Well, hydrogen is the foundation of the physical world creation. So everything goes back to hydrogen. So hydrogen is antioxidant. It is a healing gas if you take it in the
Egyptians
right
knew about the hydrogen molecule in their pictures. And in this very special Russian drawing made by Russian Egyptologists in the 19th century that I was fortunate to get a hold of.
So this is from Herodotus, before the time of Christ. In about the middle.
What was that drawing that JJ just showed?
Oh no, this is what we're talking about. In the middle of the lake stand 2 pyramids. And this is Herodotus, right? So he's before Christ and he's writing about it. And this is at the area of Fayum, Lake Moeris. And about in the middle of the lake stand 2 pyramids that top the water. That means they go higher than the water. Each one is 50 fathoms, and each one is built as much again underwater. And on top of each, there is a huge stone figure of a man sitting on a throne. So these pyramids are 100 fathoms high, and these 100 fathoms are equivalent to 600-foot furlong, the fathom measuring 6 feet or 4 cubits, the 6 cubit being each span. So you can see, literally, I'll go back again, how
Where are
these
these pyramids now? Or are they the pyramids that
No, no, totally destroyed, totally gone. We've gone to the lake. We've been on a boat in the lake, but you don't see them anymore. They've been taken down, if I can say that. So,
unless
but
they're the
interesting.
pyramids that exist now, that could they be the pyramids that exist now?
No, there's the one at Al Fayum that's also different. But if you go to Al Fayum, that pyramid where there's supposedly the labyrinth, which is 3,000 rooms. So we've gone into the pyramid, there's water. And what we're saying is that the water is critical for all these pyramids because they were literally energy generating machines. Now, we also believe they were used for initiation because if you have water, you can be initiated. You drink hydrogen water from time to time, Alan, for your own health, but you can be initiated also with the power of energized water.
And my colleagues at Stanford Research Institute in 1976 examined archaeological areas just outside the paws of the Great Sphinx of Egypt and found that there was a water basin there that presumably had been used for ritualistic purposes of baptism.
In fact, there was a popular thing that just came out on most people's phones saying, water built the pyramids. Well, they were just saying water was the way to bring the barges to the pyramids. But actually, and you see,
it was much closer. The Nile flowed, and somehow, maybe through the course of building the Aswan Dam, the course of the river changed, and we don't have that same association with pyramids. But even your friend, the Egyptian scholar, what's his name, Abraham, talks about water and pyramids.
Right.
Yes, and you can see here from Abu Ghraib, which is just the next pyramid structure down from the three pyramids, that basically all the causeways, even those of the Great Pyramid,
you're referring to Ibrahim Karim, one of my great Egyptian colleagues.
But they all went to the Nile.
Here, looking now further down the Nile, you see this concept of how the pyramids were connected with the water sources, and there was actual hydraulic tunnel systems.
Right, and so, okay, you asked, well, what could they have done with it? Well, you look at the area of Dendera, where we also were with you, Alan, and you see this interesting little snake-like thing that goes through a type of glass tube, and there's Dr. Hurtak standing there. But let's look at what, if I can get this to play, what Eric von Daniken says about it.
Not hearing sound. But he duplicated.
Look at the matching.
He duplicated, and what did he make to light it up?
Well, you can use hydrogen gas.
You can use hydrogen gas. You can produce neon gas, and then actually this took place in the year 2000 in Austria. I was one of the guest speakers with some of the Egyptologists, and a model was made of the so-called snake-like projection of the glass tubular form seen in the hieroglyphics.
So maybe that's how they built and decorated their tombs. They had hydrogen gas, which you would not normally then find. It wouldn't soot the ceiling or anything like that. And people are always wondering, how can you do things 100 feet down, 30 meters down? Because even the tomb of Osiris had edges if you don't see any soot marks anywhere.
So this is amazing.
Anyway, let's go on to we're going to wrap it up in the next 10 minutes because our time is short. But just to say, Giza's not alone. You go down.
In the Keys of Enoch, there's a world grid system, a map, and then from the Sphinx, there's a line that comes all the way down to South Africa, which you've mapped here.
But there's also Napta. You can see what the direction is east degrees. So you have 3113 is Giza.
That's on the border of Egypt and the Sudan.
You get Napta 42 degrees east, and then you get Adam's calendar 30.76. So it's not even 1 degree. 1 degree is 111 kilometers. You're not even 111 kilometers off of the whole alignment going all the way down to Adam's calendar. Let's show you these pictures very quickly. So here's Napta. It's basically a stone circle, somewhat similar to Stonehenge. And they found megalithic alignments there. They've also found burial things of animals. The people live there, cattle burials, you can see right there. Then let's go down to Adam's calendar.
I'm staying with Capitan Luis Lara March. In 2008, we did some research there. And again, the heel stone, which I'm staying above, connects with a configuration of stones very much like Stonehenge, but also it exemplifies the three stones in the belt of Orion.
Now, of course, Michael Tillinger has taken this to a greater alignment, and you see those three stones there. It's right on the edge of a cliff, so they could have used it for the star alignments. And amazing, and it's not just Adam's calendar. There's actually many crawls. There's a lot of things around there, but this is probably the most interesting. But there's many. It's
so we're very
like
excited. We're very excited because we've been there in South Africa. We've been there in Egypt. We've been there in Mexico. We've been there in China. We've been all over, showing that there is a mapping that ancients had in their mind of the stars. And Orion was the Stargate. In fact, we were told by the late American writer Brad Steiger, some of the early Christian cultures would have in the prayer, "Our Father who art in Orion, hallowed be thy name."
Yeah.
Orion was associated with the home of the Supreme One, the Stargate to the master universe,
right,
behind the physical universe.
So we don't personally think that it's a gateway to the higher lordship, to the higher heavens, because our universe is only one level of many heavens. But everything is mathematical, Dr. Hurtak, in the Keys of Enoch.
And everything is musical. So you put the two together and we begin to see the Bible beyond the Bible, or within the Bible, as well as the ancient texts of the Far East and the near aspects of Yucatan and the New World. Here is the star map from Enoch Key 215 of the 12 areas of the world that were visited by the ancients. And Desiree, you can take it from the far right of the screen.
Right, we're placing the Great Pyramid at the center and using the tribes of Israel as reported in Numbers. This is what Dr. Hurtak did in the Keys of Enoch, to go around to show sacred areas.
In other words, the tribes of Israel were a symbolic model of the human race at different parts of history, who were liberated by those angels or messengers from the star cultures.
And each place that the star that goes from the Great Pyramid, if you go over like a circle, you will find sacred areas. So you find the Azores being one, you find the area of Mexico being another, you find Hawaii actually is another one, and that's, you have the heiaus, which are types of temples, pyramid structures. Then you go around again and you find ancient areas in the Pacific. And then what Dr. Hurtak really likes is the area goes right through the Isle of Flores, which is the place where you had the little hobbits. And
here's
also,
our work here off Yonaguni in 1997-98.
So it also goes through the area of Yonaguni, which is underwater structures showing previous civilizations as far away as the Pacific.
And you can see our work with Dr. Robert Schock in an article published in another one of our books called Consciousness, Energy, and Future Science, available on our website, Keys of Enoch. So putting all of this together, we're just beginning to open up the back door to history. We're realizing that we are part of a schoolhouse of knowledge and that we must put the pieces together, as the Russians have done with this artificial pyramids they've built. Alexander Golod is one who has built 17 pyramids in 8 different locations in Russia out of synthetic material, but still the energy principle still applies.
Right. And I just want to say that the largest one he made is 144 feet or 44 meters, and it weighs 55 tons. It's actually quite light. 55 tons is not a lot, considering one of the blocks in the Great Pyramid, usually they're 2 to 3 tons, but the ones up in the King's Chamber can weigh as much as 50 to 80 tons. So this whole pyramid weighs that. It has the same abilities. It actually has...
And colleagues of ours in Russia have done musical tests, and the psychology is improved. The pathogenic strength of different viruses and bacteria become less when exposed to the energy of the pyramid inside.
Agricultural seeds actually show an increase in yield. So all the effects that our old friend Pat Flanagan talked about,
Dr. Pat Flanagan,
in his book Pyramid Power, actually can happen even in these kind of we'll say fiberglass type of pyramids.
Pat Flanagan recommended our new book, Giza's Industrial Complex, as the Rosetta Stone of how light energy was used. And so all throughout history, if we can recapitulate, revolves around the shape of sacred geometry. And we're at a point now of putting the pieces together like musical notes in a great orchestration of life and evolutionary change that's now upon us.
And so we're just going to close with the fact that pyramids are not unique on the planet because they've also been seen in the sky. And here's pictures from the USS Kidd and USS Raphael at Pralada and the USS John Finn when they saw these unusual structures. And also the fact that this strange structure, which Jaime Maussan also confirmed, was seen over the Pentagon in December of 2018, I believe
it also
it was.
appears in the Keys of Enoch as the first picture in 1973, 50 years ago. This color of a bluish type of capstone floating above the world, as we see here, with the scroll of the ancients in the background, reminds us that the architects of the higher world are coming back to the scene of the human experiment. We must have spiritual love and compassion to complete the story. Otherwise, it's just information. So here we're seeing before our eyes the capstone of higher knowledge descend over the Pentagon.
And according to Jaime Maussan, 4 different people saw this in 3 different locations. This was
We are the geometry of life. The pyramid is the geometry of evolution, the balance of the weights and measures of all levels of knowledge, science, and astronomy. But we are the temple of understanding. We are the missing capstone. With that in mind, we can go ahead, as you've seen over Moscow, the pyramidal geometry appears to remind the superpowers that we are being watched. We are being prepared. We must take now extraordinary steps to see a higher type of unity of spiritual knowledge, cultural, as well as scientific knowledge converge upon our heads.
Is Neil with us for as we do a closing or otherwise? Oh, there he is. Okay,
Yeah.
So we're just going to finalize this. Oh, I can't let that go. So the next one is Making Contact with Alan Steifel, which we're part of. And it's also talking about consciousness. We didn't talk about consciousness much here, but basically we believe that anytime you've even seen a UFO, you're entangled with it, you're consciously connected.
Consciousness expands and you become aware of your multidimensional existence.
And we also want to say that it's not just extraterrestrials. We believe there's ultra-terrestrials and extracelestials that are also watching and protecting us.
A far greater family that we're being prepared to connect with, as Desiree shows here.
Yeah, we're just going to, we'll say a couple little things. We have sounds that we've done in the Great Pyramid.
And you can get this on our website.
keysofenoch.org.
The opening of the Great Pyramid, actual sounds that produce light inside the pyramid.
But we want to wrap it up about a few final pictures.
We ask that we visualize now in a type of meditation that we are in the temple of the ancients. The pillar of light is above us. We are moving into a pillar of light, and through the pillar of light of higher knowledge, wisdom, and compassion, we'll be guided to be a light unto the nations. And so we are blessed, as we see here, even with the spheres of light that appeared in the Great Pyramid, when we use the ancient Egyptian, Aramaic, and Hebrew mantras, the light as small shields or apports appeared, orbs, if you will, with very specific geometric design patterns. And here we see the actual picture of how the Great Pyramid was lit up when I began to sing the ancient mantras of the holy names of God. This is an illustration that each pyramid of the world is the model of the temple of the Most High. But that requires our voice, our heart, our mind to be synchronized in proper balance and proper attunement, that we're part of a greater family of creation. We are being prepared to be cosmic citizens. In biblical language, we are being prepared to join the house of many mansions. We're being prepared to be elevated in unity, in orchestration, and in spiritual balance in all levels of the 7 seals or chakras of our body temple. And therefore, we bless all of you listening to this lecture, this presentation, of opening the back door to history and the front door to new history, for all of that rests upon the ability to realize that we are divine sparks in human form. We are the wayshowers to the temple of the ancients, which is within our hearts. And as we open our hearts, we become citizens of the divine. The parousia, the second return, is now upon us. So it be a blessing to all of us, as we see in the cosmogram.
And we were happy to have Neil and Alan with us with Portal to Ascension in Egypt. We didn't do a great collective picture. We should have done that. Otherwise, I'd be showing it right now. But we had that joy and that sharing together.
With Neil and you, Ellen, in Egypt, For those who were in unique areas using the mantras, actually the walls began to open momentarily, and people saw hieroglyphic figures, detailed, and they were of different cultural backgrounds. And so people realized that the pyramids themselves have a higher type of energy coding that you can see when you get into a paraphysical stream of consciousness. So from the eye at the beginning, at the top, to the eye at the bottom of human self-realization, we are, as it were, the manifestation of the Homo Deus, the human, and the divine coming together.
Thank you. And if you want more information about us, go to keysofenoch.org and keep listening to Portal to Ascension.
Be joyous, be hopeful, realize that life is eternal, and we are here in the schoolhouse of the ancients as students of the future.